I don't remember how long I stood there. Long enough for my legs to start shaking. Long enough for the hallway to feel colder than it was. Long enough for my hand to forget whether it was knocking or holding me upright. I pressed my palm against the door frame because if I didn't, I knew I would sink to the floor. And I couldn't afford that. Not here. My breathing was wrong. Too shallow. Too fast. Every breath scraped on the way in, like my ribs were bruised on the inside too. I tried to steady it. I failed. I didn't knock again. I couldn't. The door opened just a little. Lights spilled out first. Warm. Quiet. It crept across the floor and climbed slowly, like it was discovering me the same way he was. Shoes. Knees. Torn fabric. Bruises. I felt his eyes on them before I felt them on me. I knew what he saw. I'd been seeing it in every reflection all night. For a second, nothing happened. The door didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, close enough that the air changed. Close enough that I could feel the weight of him without knowing anything else. My knees buckled. Not all the way. Just enough to tell the truth. Just enough to admit that whatever had brought me here was stronger than me now. My shoulder scraped the wall as I caught myself, my fingers digging into concrete like it might hold me together. I lifted my head slowly. Carefully. Sudden movement felt dangerous. That's when he saw my face. I watched his eyes change as they took it in. The swelling. The cut. The way my mouth trembled because I was trying not to cry and trying not to fall at the same time. I wanted to speak. I wanted to explain. But my voice stayed trapped somewhere deep in my chest. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't ask why I was there. He didn't rush toward me or step away. He just looked. Really looked. The way people do when they understand more than they want to. Something shifted in him. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But I saw it. A tightening. A stillness. Like a door closing somewhere behind his eyes. His face darkened. I leaned forward without meaning to, my body finally giving up the argument. Just a small movement. A quiet one. As if I trusted that the space between us would catch me before the floor did. The hallway stayed silent. The door stayed open. And standing there, bruised and shaking, I realized I had crossed into a place where whatever happened next would change everything. Welcome to Ari Love Beyond. If this is your first time here, I'm glad you found your way. And to my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers, welcome back. Before we go any further, take a moment. Find a quiet place. Dim the lights. If you're listening from somewhere in the world right now, tell me where you are. I love seeing how far our dark romance family reaches. Make sure you're subscribed, tap that like button, and stay with me. Every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. Now, let me tell you what happened next. The door closed behind me with a sound that was softer than I expected. Not a slam. Not a warning. Just a quiet, final click that told me there was no hallway anymore. No cold air. No place to retreat to if my legs finally gave up. Whatever happened next would happen inside this room. I stayed where I was. I didn't step forward. I didn't turn around. I stood exactly where the light had left me, my back straight only because I was afraid that if I bent even a little, I wouldn't be able to stand again. My hands were still shaking. I tried to hide it by pressing my fingers together, but the tremor ran deeper than that. It lived somewhere under my skin. He didn't touch me. That was the first thing I noticed. Most people did. When they saw someone like me, standing like this, breathing like this, they reached out too fast. Or they stepped away like pain was contagious. He did neither. He stayed where he was, a few steps in front of me, close enough that I could feel his presence, far enough that I couldn't read it. The room smelled clean. Not like perfume. Not like smoke. Something sharper. Controlled. Everything here felt intentional. The lights weren't harsh, but they weren't soft either. They showed what they needed to show. No more. No less. I became painfully aware of myself in that light. The tear along my sleeve. The way the fabric clung where it had been pulled too hard. The bruises I hadn't been able to hide no matter how carefully I dressed. Some were dark and angry. Others were yellowing at the edges, fading slowly, like they didn't want to leave yet. I felt his eyes move. Not quickly. Not greedily. Slowly. Like he was counting something. Measuring. Taking inventory. My hands curled tighter. My nails pressed into my palms. I welcomed the sting because it reminded me I was still here. Still standing. He said nothing. The silence stretched, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full. Heavy. Like something was being weighed in it. I tried to breathe quietly, but my chest refused to cooperate. Each breath caught, then escaped in short bursts. I hated the sound it made. I hated that it gave me away. I shifted my weight. Just a little. The room tilted. Not enough to fall. Enough to warn me. I steadied myself against the back of a chair I hadn't noticed before. It was solid. Expensive. Everything in this room looked like it belonged exactly where it was. Nothing out of place. Nothing accidental. Even the distance between us felt measured. He took one step closer. Only one. I froze. My heart kicked hard against my ribs, and for a split second, I thought I had misjudged everything. But he stopped again, still not touching me, still not reaching out. Close enough now that I could see the details of his face. The calm set of his mouth. The stillness in his eyes. Not cold. Not warm. Controlled. I realized then that he was angry. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that spills over and announces itself. This was something quieter. Denser. Like it had been sitting there for a long time, waiting for a reason. I didn't know if I was that reason. He looked at my arm. The one I hadn't been able to fully cover. His gaze lingered there, just long enough that I felt exposed. Not embarrassed. Studied. As if my skin was telling him a story I hadn't said out loud. I swallowed. My throat burned. My mouth was dry, but I didn't ask for water. I didn't ask for anything. Asking felt dangerous. Like it would shift the balance in a way I didn't understand yet. I waited. The room stayed quiet except for my breathing and the faint hum of something electrical in the walls. I wondered how many decisions had been made in this space. How many people had stood where I was standing now, feeling smaller than the room itself. My legs trembled again. This time I couldn't hide it. I hated that. I hated that my body kept betraying me, showing him exactly how close I was to the edge. But even then, he didn't rush forward. He didn't offer a hand. He just watched, his expression unreadable, like he was letting the moment reveal itself. The longer he looked, the more I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief. Not fear either. Something heavier. The sense that I had already crossed a line just by being here. That whatever rules govern this place, I was now part of them. He turned slightly, reaching for something on the table beside him. My shoulders tensed, every muscle ready for impact, but all he did was slide a glass of water closer to me. He didn't push it into my hands. He didn't tell me to drink. He left the choice with me. That felt deliberate. I stared at the glass. The water inside was still. Clear. It felt like a test I didn't know how to pass. My hand hovered above it, shaking, before I finally wrapped my fingers around the cool surface. The first sip burned going down, but I didn't cough. I refused to give the moment that much. When I lowered the glass, his eyes met mine again. There was no softness there. But there was focus. He had noticed everything. The way I flinched when I moved too fast. The way my shoulders curved inward like I was trying to make myself smaller. The way I stood like I didn't trust the ground to hold me. And still, he said nothing. The silence pressed harder now. Not uncomfortable. Expectant. I felt like the room itself was waiting. Finally, he spoke. Just one sentence. Not my name. Not my story. Not a question that asked me to explain myself. He asked something else. Something that told me this wasn't about curiosity anymore. It was about what came next. I didn't answer his question right away. Not because I didn't understand it, but because answering it meant admitting something I had been avoiding since the moment I turned into that hallway. My fingers tightened around the empty glass. The water had steadied my throat, but not my thoughts. He didn't repeat himself. He waited. That silence again. It wasn't impatient. It wasn't kind. It was deliberate. Like he already knew that whatever I said next would matter more than anything I had said before. I drew in a slow breath and let it out through my nose. My chest still hurt, but I forced my voice to work. I didn't come here by accident. The words sounded strange in the room. Too small. Too fragile for the weight they carried. He didn't react. Not outwardly. But I felt the air shift, like the room itself leaned in just a little. I knew which door I was choosing, I continued. I just didn't know if I would make it here. I stopped there. I didn't say how many other doors I had passed. I didn't say how many streets I had crossed without looking back. I didn't say how many times I thought about turning around and choosing something easier. Safer. I had learned that too much truth too soon could be dangerous. He moved then, not toward me, but around me, slow steps circling like he was trying to see the whole shape of the situation. I turned my head to follow him, every muscle tense, but he stayed just outside my reach. You came to the wrong place, he said calmly. I nodded. I know. That was the truth, too. The wrong place was the only place left. He stopped near the window, looking out for a moment, not at the street itself, but at its reflection in the glass. Lights flickered below. Movement. Life continuing, unaware of how close it was to colliding with mine. They'll be looking, he said, not as a question. My stomach tightened. They already are. I hadn't meant to admit that so easily. The words slipped out before I could weigh them. His gaze snapped back to me, sharp now, focused in a way that made my skin prickle. How long, he asked. I hesitated. Counted the seconds in my head. Not long. That was as honest as I could be. The quiet that followed was heavier than before. He seemed to be listening, not to me, but beyond the walls. As if the building itself might tell him something if he paid enough attention. I became aware of every sound. The hum in the walls. The faint tick of a clock somewhere deeper in the space. The distant echo of voices far below. Each noise felt amplified, like it could be the one that gave me away. I shifted closer to the wall instinctively, my shoulder brushing it again. My body knew what my mind was still refusing to fully accept. I was being hunted. Not in the dramatic way people imagine. Not with shouting or sirens. This was quieter. More patient. The kind of pursuit that waited for mistakes instead of forcing them. He noticed the movement. You're afraid, he said simply. I let out a short, humorless breath. That's one word for it. He studied me again, but this time his eyes didn't linger on my injuries. They searched my face. My posture. The way I held myself like I was bracing for impact that hadn't arrived yet. You could have gone to the police, he said. I laughed softly before I could stop myself. The sound surprised both of us. That would have been the wrong door, I said. He didn't argue. That told me more than any question would have. I took a step forward without thinking. The room didn't spin this time, but my legs protested. I stopped again, steadying myself. I didn't come here for protection, I said quickly, before he could assume too much. I came because you're difficult to reach. A flicker crossed his expression. Interest, maybe. Or caution. People don't usually knock on my door when they're afraid, he replied. They avoid it. I tried that, I said quietly. It didn't work. He turned away again, pacing now, slow and measured. Each step felt calculated, like he was mapping consequences in his head. Helping me wouldn't be simple. I could see that now. Whatever lines existed in his world, my presence was already smudging them. Do you know what happens to people who bring trouble into this space? He asked. I shook my head. I only know what happens if I didn't. That made him stop. I watched his back, the straight line of his shoulders. The way he held himself like control was not something he practiced, but something he owned. I wondered how many times someone had stood in front of him like this, asking for something they didn't deserve and couldn't survive without. I wondered which category I fell into. A sound cut through the room then. Not loud. Not obvious. Just the faint buzz of a device somewhere near the entrance. My heart lurched. He heard it too. The calm in his face didn't disappear, but it hardened. His eyes flicked briefly toward the door, then back to me. Did anyone see you come in? He asked. I don't think so, I said, then corrected myself. I hope not. Hope felt thin, suddenly. Another sound. This time unmistakable. A vibration. A phone, somewhere close. His jaw tightened. Stay where you are, he said. The command wasn't harsh, but it wasn't optional either. He moved toward the door, his steps quiet despite the tension now coiling in the room. I stood frozen, every instinct screaming to run even though I had nowhere left to go. I listened. Muffled voices filtered through the thick wood. I couldn't make out words, only tone. Low. Controlled. The kind of voices that didn't need to raise themselves to be dangerous. My breath caught. They were closer than I thought. He spoke briefly, his voice steady, unhurried. Whatever he said, it was enough to make the voices pause. Enough to make them retreat, at least for the moment. When he returned, his expression had changed. Not darker. Sharper. They're asking questions, he said. My stomach dropped. About me. About anyone who doesn't belong. The way he said it made it clear how rare that was. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. My mind raced, replaying every step I had taken, every shadow I might have crossed. I won't stay long, I said quickly. I swear. I just needed time. Just enough to disappear. Disappear where? He asked. I didn't have an answer. That silence again. Only this time, it felt like the last calm before something broke. You need to understand something, he said finally. Letting you stay here doesn't just put you at risk. I met his gaze. It puts you at risk. Yes. The word landed between us, heavy and final. I saw it then. The shape of the choice in front of him. It wasn't about sympathy. It wasn't even about morality. It was about balance. Power. Consequences that rippled outward. And I was standing right in the center of them. Another vibration buzzed through the room, closer this time. My heart slammed hard against my ribs. Someone else knew. Someone else was paying attention. I swallowed, my voice barely steady when I spoke again. I didn't mean to drag you into this. His eyes didn't leave mine. You already have. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was dangerous. And for the first time since I knocked on that door, I understood that staying might be more dangerous than running. But running was no longer an option. He didn't tell me to sit. He didn't tell me to follow him either. He simply turned and walked deeper into the space, and somehow I knew I was expected to move when my legs were ready. Not when they were steady. Just when they were willing. I followed slowly, every step measured. The room opened up into another, wider and quieter, like it had been designed to absorb secrets. The light here was lower. Softer. It revealed less and demanded more attention for what it did show. He stopped beside a long table. On it were things that didn't belong to comfort. A phone. Papers stacked too neatly. A jacket folded once and then again, like someone who didn't rush had left it there. I realized then that this place wasn't just shelter. It was command. He turned to face me again, and this time his eyes didn't scan. They fixed. As if he had decided there was no point pretending he hadn't already seen enough. You're hurt in more than one way, he said. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't accusation. It was fact. I nodded. The room felt smaller. Or maybe I was. You don't get injuries like that from one night, he continued. Or from one mistake. My chest tightened. My first instinct was to deflect, to minimize, to turn everything into something survivable by shrinking it. But something in his stillness stopped me. I shook my head slowly. No. He waited. I looked down at my hands, at the faint tremor that still hadn't left them. At the bruising along my knuckles that I hadn't even noticed anymore. I traced one finger over the edge of the table, grounding myself in the cool surface. I learned how to hide early, I said quietly. I learned which colors covered better. Which sleeves didn't ride up. Which excuses sounded reasonable. He didn't interrupt. That's how it starts, I continued. Not with violence. With control. With rules you don't realize you're agreeing to until breaking them becomes dangerous. I paused, my throat tightening again. By the time it leaves marks, you're already trained to explain them away. He looked at my arm again. Not like before. Not cataloging. Understanding. How long, he asked. I hesitated. Not because I didn't know, but because saying it out loud made it real in a way I wasn't sure I could carry. Long enough to forget what normal feels like, I said finally. That did something to him. I saw it in the way his jaw set, the way his eyes hardened, not toward me, but toward something beyond the room. Toward memory. Toward calculation. You didn't come here for comfort, he said. No. You came here because you were running out of places. Yes, The truth settled between us, heavy and undeniable. He turned away from me, walking toward the window again. He didn't look out this time. He stared at his reflection, like he was trying to see what version of himself would walk away from this. "You know what I am," he said quietly. "I know what people say," I replied. "And that didn't stop you." "No," I said. "It's why I came." That made him look at me again. For the first time since I arrived, I felt like I had surprised him. "I didn't need someone kind," I continued. "I needed someone who wouldn't be afraid of what follows." The words hung there. Dangerous. Honest. He studied me for a long moment, and I felt exposed in a new way. Not weak. Seen. "You understand what it costs," he said. "I understand what it costs not to," I answered. Silence fell again, but this one felt different. Not waiting. Deciding. He reached for the phone on the table. My breath caught instinctively, every nerve screaming that this was the moment everything turned against me. But he didn't dial. He unlocked it. Scrolled. Stopped. Then he asked a question that changed everything. "Did they threaten your life?" he asked, "or just make you believe they could?" I swallowed. Both. That was when his face truly darkened. Not anger. Not rage. Resolve. He set the phone down carefully, like he didn't want the sound of it touching the table to carry too far. "You didn't come here by mistake," he said again, but this time it wasn't observation. It was acknowledgement. I shook my head. "I came because I knew once you saw me, you couldn't unsee it." His gaze dropped briefly to my bruises, then lifted back to my eyes. "You're right," he said. The admission was quiet. Final. He walked past me then, close enough that I felt the brush of air as he moved. He didn't touch me, but his presence was different now. Protective in a way that didn't soften him, but sharpened the space around us. "Sit," he said, pointing to a chair. I did, my legs finally giving in without protest. The relief was immediate and painful at the same time. He crouched in front of me, just far enough to keep distance, close enough that his voice didn't need to rise. "If I do this," he said, "there's no pretending afterward. No half measures." I nodded. "I know. They won't stop looking," he continued. "They won't forget." "I'm counting on that," I said. That made him pause. "Explain," he said. "Because if they don't stop," I said carefully, "then they expose themselves. And people like you don't ignore exposure." A slow exhale left him. "You're asking me to pick a side," he said. "I'm asking you to admit you already have one," I replied. The room felt charged now, like the air before a storm. I could feel the weight of everything he wasn't saying pressing in from all sides. Power didn't like to be challenged. Networks didn't like disruption. And I was disruption incarnate. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping softly against the floor as he moved. He crossed the room with purpose now, no longer pacing, no longer circling. He picked up the jacket from the table and slipped it on with practiced ease. No speech. No warning. Just action. He checked his watch. Pressed a button on the phone. Typed a short message. Sent it. My heart pounded. "What did you do?" He didn't answer. He walked to the door and opened it just enough to speak to someone outside. His voice was low, controlled, efficient. Orders, not explanations. When he closed the door again, his expression was set. "What happens now?" I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something like regret flicker beneath the control. "Now," he said, "we wait for them to make the first mistake." A distant sound echoed through the building. Footsteps. More than one pair. Purposeful. My pulse spiked. "They're already closer," I whispered. "Yes," he said. "That was inevitable." I stood, my legs unsteady again, but my mind clearer than it had been all night. "You don't have to do this," I said, even though I knew he already had. He met my gaze. "I stopped having that choice the moment I saw you." The truth of that hit me harder than fear. Another sound. Closer now. A door opening somewhere below. Voices rising just slightly, carried upward by the structure of the building. He moved toward the entrance, then stopped, turning back to me one last time. "Whatever happens next," he said, "you stay where I tell you. No matter what you hear." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He opened the door. And stepped into the moment where consequences begin. He closed the door behind him. Not hard. Not quietly either. Just enough to say this space was sealed now, and whatever crossed its threshold next would do so with intention. I didn't move. I stayed where he told me. I focused on my breathing, on the steady rhythm of the room, on the fact that for the first time in a long while, someone else was standing between me and what hunted me. The voices outside didn't rise. That scared me more than shouting ever could. That was when I realized this wasn't just about me hiding. This was about them testing him. I heard footsteps retreat, measured and calm, like people who believed they were still in control. He returned a moment later, his expression unreadable. "They know you're here," he said. I nodded. I assumed they would. "You didn't just run," he continued. "You calculated." Yes. He studied me again, like he was finally allowing himself to look backward through everything that had already happened and connect the pieces. "Start talking," he said. "From the beginning." I sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath me, grounding me in the present. When I spoke this time, my voice didn't shake. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I had reached the part of the truth that demanded to be told. "I wasn't supposed to be visible," I said. "That was the rule." He didn't interrupt. "I worked in places where questions weren't asked, where silence was currency. I saw things that weren't meant to be seen. Numbers that didn't belong. Names that didn't appear twice." I glanced up at him. His eyes sharpened slightly. "I learned early that knowledge didn't make you powerful," I continued. "It made you expendable." The bruises suddenly made sense in a way they hadn't before. "They didn't hit me because I disobeyed," I said. "They hit me because I remembered." He didn't react outwardly, but the air changed. The room felt tighter. "They were moving something," I went on. "Money first. Then people." I didn't understand the scale until it was too late. He crossed his arms slowly. A defensive posture, not against me, but against what he was beginning to see. "I tried to disappear quietly," I said. "I changed routines. I erased traces. I played small. I laughed once bitter. They noticed anyway." His jaw tightened. "That's when the warning started," I said. "Not threats. Warnings. Bruises that could be explained. Falls. Accidents." I rolled my sleeve back further, exposing marks I hadn't shown him before. Older. Deeper. Faded but unmistakable. His gaze darkened again, deeper than before. "They wanted to know who else I talked to," I said. "Who I trusted." "And you didn't," he said. "I couldn't," I replied. "Because the moment I did, someone else would bleed for it." Silence stretched between us, heavy with implication. "So why me?" he asked finally. The question had been waiting a long time. "Because your name was the last one they didn't want connected," I said. That got his attention. "They're careful," I explained. "They operate around power, not through it. They avoid collisions." "With me," he said. "With you," I confirmed. I leaned forward slightly. Which meant if I came here, it would force them to choose. "Between exposure and escalation," he said quietly. "Yes." His eyes never left my face. "You used me." I didn't flinch. "I trusted you." The difference mattered. "They didn't expect me to make it this far," I continued. "They assumed fear would finish the job." "And when it didn't," he said. "They escalated," I replied. "That was tonight. The knocking. The chase. The door." The reason I had been trembling wasn't just exhaustion. It was timing. "They're running out of patience," I said. "And they don't move like amateurs." He exhaled slowly, controlled. "No," he agreed. "They don't." I watched realization settle in fully now. This wasn't a random plea at his door. It was a fault line running straight through networks he knew well. "Names," he said. I hesitated only a second. Then I gave them. "Not all." "Enough." His expression hardened with each one. "Those aren't small players," he said. "No," I replied. "They're protected ones." That was the moment the story shifted completely. This wasn't about whether he would help me. This was about what helping me would dismantle. "They're planning something big," I added. "Soon." I wasn't supposed to live long enough to notice. A faint smile touched his mouth. Not amusement. Anticipation. "That explains the pressure," he said. "And the bruises," I replied. He nodded once, slow and deliberate. "You came here because you knew I wouldn't hand you back." "Yes." And because you knew I wouldn't ignore what you know. Yes. Another silence. But this one felt different. Like a door closing behind us both. They crossed a line, he said. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread at the certainty in his voice. They already had, I said. They just didn't know it yet. His phone vibrated on the table. Once. Then again. He glanced at it, then at me. Point of no return, he said quietly. I swallowed. For who? For all of us. He picked up the phone and answered it without greeting. I'm listening, he said. I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but I didn't need to. I could see it in his face. The careful phrasing. The testing tone. The assumption of leverage. Yes, he said. She's here. A pause. No, he continued. She's not leaving. Another pause. Longer this time. His eyes flicked to me. Steady. Certain. Because, he said, if you touch her again, everything you're hiding becomes public. The room felt like it was holding its breath. I don't bluff, he added calmly. And you know that. Silence on the line. Then he ended the call. I stared at him, my pulse roaring in my ears. What did you just do? I made my move, he replied. And them. They'll make theirs, he said. They can't afford not to now. Fear surged through me, sharp and electric. That puts you in danger. A corner of his mouth lifted slightly. It already did the moment you knocked. I stood slowly, every nerve alive. I didn't want to burn everything down, I said. I just wanted it to stop. He met my gaze. Sometimes that's the same thing. Another vibration. Not his phone this time. Something deeper in the building. Movement. Signals. They're mobilizing, I whispered. Yes, he said. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware that the choice I'd made at his door had rippled outward faster than I could have imagined. Are you ready for what happens next? He asked. I thought of the bruises. The silence. The fear that had chased me here. I've been ready for a long time, I said. He nodded once. Outside, somewhere beyond the walls, someone made a move that could not be undone. And the world I had been running from finally turned to face us both. I knew it was coming before it happened. Not because anyone warned me. Not because I heard shouting or gunfire or chaos in the distance. But because the building changed its posture. The air shifted, heavy and alert, like a held breath that had gone on too long. The calm was gone. Not shattered. Not broken. Replaced. He didn't tell me to stay behind this time. He didn't need to. The decision had already been made, and somehow, without a word spoken, I was part of it now. Not hidden. Not protected by ignorance. Just present. Sit, he said, not harshly, not gently either. I did. My hands were steady for the first time all night. That scared me more than the shaking ever had. Because it meant I had crossed out of fear and into something else. Resolve. The men arrived quietly. Of course they did. The kind of people who relied on noise had already been eliminated from whatever game this was. These were the ones who moved when silence failed. I felt them before I saw them. The pressure of attention. The sense of being assessed, weighed, measured for consequence. They looked at me like a liability. They looked at him like a variable. No one smiled. The door closed behind them, and for a brief moment, the room felt impossibly small. Too many truths. Too many unspoken threats. One of them spoke first. You didn't have to do this. His voice was calm. Polite. Almost regretful. He didn't respond. I watched his face instead. The stillness. The restraint. The darkness that had settled there hours ago now fully awake. You've always been good at staying out of other people's messes, the man continued. This one isn't yours. That was when I understood something important. They were afraid. Not of violence. Not of retaliation. Of precedent. She came to me, he said finally. The room went very quiet. That wasn't an invitation, another voice said. It was, he replied, the moment you followed her here. I swallowed hard, my pulse loud in my ears. Every instinct screamed that this was the part where everything collapsed. Where protection failed. Where power proved conditional. Instead, he stepped forward. Not aggressively. Not dramatically. Deliberately. You hurt her, he said. No accusation. No raised voice. Just fact. One of them scoffed softly. You don't know. I know enough, he cut in. His gaze flicked to me for half a second. Not reassurance. Recognition. You underestimated the cost, he continued. That was your mistake. The man closest to him shifted his weight. A subtle move. Defensive. We can still fix this, he said. Quietly. I realized then that this was the moment they thought they could negotiate. They hadn't understood yet. He shook his head once. No. That single word landed heavier than any threat. You don't get quiet anymore, he said. You get exposed. I felt my breath catch. You'll destroy balance, someone said sharply. You destroyed it, he replied. When you decided bruises were cheaper than silence. That was it. That was the line. Everything that followed happened without chaos, but not without consequence. Phones came out. Messages sent. Names moved from private memory into active motion. I didn't see violence. I didn't hear screams. What I saw was far worse for them. Control slipping. One by one, their confidence thinned. Their posture changed. They stopped looking at him and started looking at exits. At each other. At me. As if trying to calculate whether I was worth this much damage. I met their gaze and didn't look away. I had been hunted. I had been hurt. I had been afraid. But I was no longer silent. One of them turned back to him. You're choosing her over everything. He didn't hesitate. I'm choosing the truth. The room felt like it might collapse under the weight of that. I felt tears sting my eyes then, sudden and unwelcome. Not from fear. From release. From the realization that for the first time, someone powerful had looked at what was done to me and said no. Not later. Not quietly. Now. The men left in silence. No threats. No promises. They didn't need to say anything. The war had already started. When the door closed behind them, the room felt enormous again. Empty in a way that echoed. I sagged back in the chair, suddenly aware of every ache, every bruise, every ounce of exhaustion I had been carrying. He turned to me. It's not over, he said. I know, I replied. They'll move faster now. I know. He studied me for a long moment. You're not afraid. I considered that. Then I shook my head slowly. I am. Just not of them anymore. That seemed to surprise him. What are you afraid of then? He asked. I looked down at my hands. At the faint tremor finally returning. What it costs you. Silence. That's not your burden, he said. It became mine when you stood between me and them, I replied. He didn't argue. Instead, he did something unexpected. He sat down. Not across from me. Not looming. Just near enough to make the space feel human again. You didn't survive by accident, he said quietly. You survived because you pay attention. I nodded. And because I chose the right door. Yes, he agreed. You did. The building hummed around us. Movement continued elsewhere. Plans unfolding beyond my understanding. Consequences rippling outward. But in that moment, there was only the aftermath of decision. What happens now? I asked. He leaned back slightly, his gaze distant. Now we see who else was lying. My chest tightened. And me? He looked at me again, really looked. You're not invisible anymore, he said. That makes you dangerous. I let out a slow breath. I never wanted to be. I know, he replied. But you are. A phone vibrated somewhere. Not urgently. Not yet. The outcome was still uncertain. The lines had been drawn, but the final shape of what this would become hadn't revealed itself. All I knew was this. I had come to his door trembling, bruised, half collapsed by fear. And now, standing in the center of a storm I helped trigger, I realized something terrifying and true. The world I ran from had collided with the one I entered. And neither of us was walking away unchanged. Before I begin, if you're here with me now, take a second to tap that like button and comment where you're listening from. I love seeing the corners of the world where my midnight hearts are watching, feeling every beat of this story alongside me. The room was quieter than it had been all night. Not empty. Not relieved. Just still. Not in peace, but in the aftermath of decisions that had no easy undoing. I remained seated, my hands folded in my lap, trembling slightly from exhaustion more than fear. My bruises throbbed in time with my pulse. My body felt every second I had been on the run, every step that had brought me to this moment. Yet here I was, breathing, alive. And for the first time, I could let myself notice that. He didn't move immediately. He stood near the door, one hand brushing over the frame as if checking the world hadn't moved while we had been caught in it. His expression was calm, but I could see the weight there now, subtle but undeniable. Decisions made, alliances shifted, consequences sent into motion. Nothing left untouched. Not for him. Not for me. I finally looked up at him. His eyes were steady, but they carried the kind of quiet that comes after storms, not before. The kind that says everything is changed, even if it doesn't appear to be. "I'm safe," I whispered. The words felt small in the silence. "Yes," he said. A pause. His voice carried weight without judgment. For now. The words didn't make me feel safer. They just made me feel the truth. Safety was fragile. It could be measured, yes, but never guaranteed. I let my gaze drift around the room. The details I hadn't noticed before, his meticulous organization, the way the chairs were placed, the subtle marks on the table that told of conversations and plans made in quiet tension, spoke of control and order. Even after everything, he maintained it. A fortress. Not impenetrable, but still powerful. Still in command. "You're quiet," he said, stepping closer. Not threatening. Not demanding. Observing. Measuring. The same careful gaze he had used on me when I first appeared. "I'm thinking," I admitted. "About what happens next. About what we've done. About what they'll do." He nodded once. And I said slowly, about who we are now. How we move forward. Not back. Not pretending any of this didn't happen. He let that sit. Let the weight of the night settle between us. Then he spoke, softer this time. "You survived because you understood the rules before they were enforced. Because you accepted them when it was too late to ignore them." I felt the tremor in my chest relax a fraction. I had not just survived. I had endured. I had chosen. We didn't speak for several minutes after that. Just the faint hum of the building, the low creak of settling walls, and the residual echo of footsteps that had disappeared into memory. Finally, he broke the silence. "Do you understand the cost?" "Yes," I said. "But it doesn't feel like an ending." "Not really. More like an intermission." He gave a tight nod. "Everything we do is cost. Even quiet survival." I let that sink in. The weight of it pressed against me, heavy yet grounding. Every bruise, every step, every decision, it was all part of a story that was mine to carry now. He moved toward the table and poured 2 glasses of water, sliding one toward me. I took it, grateful for the simple gesture. Small acts of control and care amid chaos. "You'll need to be ready," he said. "This isn't over." "Not for anyone." I nodded, not afraid now, just aware. "I'm ready." And somehow, saying it aloud made it feel true. Not bravado. Not a promise. Just fact. The rest of the evening passed without incident. Not celebration. Not laughter. But a quiet acknowledgement of endurance. The danger I had fled collided with the world I had entered, but now it seemed it had paused. Temporarily. I watched him. Still powerful. Still precise. Still dangerous. But also, just for a moment, human. The edges of his control softened by choices made in the dark. He was not untouched, either. His world, though built of order and calculation, had been shaken tonight. Subtly. Permanently. I realized then that the night's events had changed us both. Not visibly. Not with fanfare. But underneath the calm, beneath the quiet strength, everything had shifted. "You know," he said quietly, "most people would not survive what you survived. Most people would not ask for it, either." "I didn't ask," I said. "I came." His eyes held mine for a long moment. "That makes you dangerous." I smiled faintly, despite the heaviness in my chest. "I never wanted to be." "You are," he said simply. We stayed like that for a while. Just existing in the aftermath. The weight of the decisions made, the paths chosen, the risks taken. All of it settling around us like dust that refused to settle entirely. Eventually, I stood. The bruises still burned, the exhaustion still pressed into every muscle, but I felt lighter. Not free. Not entirely, but present. Surviving. Enduring. Able to face what came next. He didn't move to stop me. Didn't offer guidance or command. Just a presence that reminded me I was no longer alone in this calculus of danger. I stepped toward the door. Paused. Turned. Will it ever be the same? He didn't answer immediately. Just let the question hang. Then he said quietly, no. But it will be yours. I exhaled slowly. The words felt like a bridge between fear and acceptance. Between the chaos I had fled and the control I had stepped into. The city outside was quiet now. Not forgiving. Not healed. But quiet. For the first time tonight, I felt the possibility of movement beyond reaction, beyond survival. And as I looked back at him, I realized that some doors, once opened, could never close again. But standing on the other side didn't have to destroy you. It could redefine you. Before we move forward, I want to know something from you. Right now, take a second. Hit like if you've been with me this far. Drop a comment about what you think you would have done in my place. How far would you go to survive? How far would you risk to be seen? I read everyone, and your hearts are part of this story too. He turned away from me, moving toward the window. I watched him, the low light catching the sharp lines of his face, the quiet authority that had guided us through every tense second. The storm had passed for now, but the lessons lingered. Nothing undone. Nothing forgiven. I touched my bruised arms gently. Each mark a testament. Each tremor a reminder. I had survived. Not untouched. Not unscarred. But present. I was here. He returned to his chair, sitting near enough to be close, distant enough to allow me space. We didn't speak. Words were unnecessary. The story had already spoken itself through the room, through the silence, through every choice and hesitation and glance. Finally, he said, rest. But don't pretend this is closure. It isn't. I nodded. I won't. The weight of the night pressed in, but it felt lighter somehow, shared now, understood, acknowledged. The consequences were still out there, waiting. But inside this room, there was a moment of quiet. A moment to breathe. A moment to exist after fear. And in that space, I realized that surviving didn't mean being untouched. It meant facing everything, holding on to yourself, and stepping forward anyway. The night lingered around us, calm but watchful, like it knew the next chapter was coming, but couldn't intrude yet. And here, my midnight hearts, I want you to reflect with me. What would you have done in my place? Could you have survived? Could you have faced the consequences? Comment below. Share your thoughts. Let me know where you're listening from tonight. Every story you leave in your words keeps this family alive, keeps our shared dark romance burning even when the world is quiet. I took one last deep breath, bracing for whatever came next. The room, the night, the city, they waited. We were still standing. Not untouched, but alive. And that, for now, was enough. I didn't sleep right away. Even when the room grew dimmer, even when the city outside softened into a low, distant hum, my body refused to rest. Survival does that to you. It keeps you alert long after the danger has stepped back. I sat on the edge of the bed they prepared for me, my feet touching the floor, grounding myself in something solid. The sheets were clean. Too clean. They smelled like nothing, which somehow made everything feel more unreal. I kept waiting for the other feeling to return. The panic. The chase. The sharp certainty that something terrible was seconds away. It didn't. Instead, there was silence. And in that silence, memories started to surface. Not the worst ones. Those stayed buried, sealed behind instinct. What came instead were the smaller moments. The choices. The pauses where I could have turned back but didn't. The door I chose. The way his face had changed when he saw the bruises, not with shock, but with recognition. That part stayed with me. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the soreness, the tenderness of skin that had taken too much. I wasn't fragile anymore, but I wasn't healed either. Survival sat somewhere in between. A knock came at the door. Not sharp. Not commanding. Just present. I looked up, my breath catching for half a second before I studied it. Yes, I said. The door opened slowly. He didn't step all the way in. He didn't assume space. He stood at the threshold like he had earlier, except now the power between us felt different. Less unknown. More shared. You should rest, he said. I will, I replied. Just not yet. He nodded, as if he understood exactly what that meant. There's something you should know, he added. I waited. They won't come tonight, he said. Or tomorrow. And after that? I asked. His gaze didn't waver. After that, nothing will be simple. For anyone. I let the word settle. I didn't want to ruin anything, I said quietly. You didn't, he replied. You revealed it. That distinction mattered more than he probably realized. He left me then, closing the door gently behind him. Not sealing me in. Just giving me space. Time moved strangely after that. Minutes stretched. Thoughts tangled and untangled. At some point, I lay back, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move as the building breathed around me. I wondered who I was without the chase. That question frightened me more than any threat ever had. Morning came slowly. Not with sunlight flooding the room, but with a soft shift in tone. The city waking without knowing what had shifted beneath it overnight. I felt it before I saw it. My body easing, inch by inch, out of its defensive posture. I stood and walked to the window. The world outside looked ordinary. Cars. People. Motion. It felt almost insulting how normal it all was. I touched the glass lightly, grounding myself again. You're still here, I whispered to my reflection. And I was. Later, when I stepped back into the main space, things had changed subtly. Not rearranged. Recalibrated. People moved with intention, not urgency. Conversations happened in low voices. Plans weren't whispered anymore. They were measured. He stood near the table, speaking with someone I didn't recognize. The moment he noticed me, the conversation ended without ceremony. The other person left. You should eat, he said. I almost laughed at the normality of it. I don't think I can. Try, he said. Not as an order. As advice. I did. Slowly. Every bite reminded me I had a body. A real one. One that needed care, not just endurance. You didn't ask for anything, he said after a while. I looked up. What would I ask for? Protection. Resources. Disappearance. I considered it. I already asked for what mattered. And that was. For it to stop, I said. He nodded. It has. In the way you meant. I believed him. That afternoon passed without incident, but not without consequence. Messages arrived. Updates filtered in. I didn't hear details, but I felt the ripple. Something larger had been disturbed. The kind of disturbance that didn't settle quickly. You could leave, he said at one point. If you want. The offer surprised me. And go where? Anywhere, he replied. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Then shook my head. Not yet. He didn't ask why. As evening approached, the weight returned in a different form. Not fear. Responsibility. Awareness. I knew now what kind of world I had stepped into, and I knew I couldn't unknow it. I found him again by the window. They'll blame you, I said. Yes. They'll test you. Yes. And they'll remember me. He turned to look at me fully. That's already accounted for. Something in his tone made my chest tighten. At what cost? He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, every choice has one. I nodded. That was the truth I had learned the hard way. The night settled again, calmer than the last, but heavier somehow. I felt changed in ways I couldn't name yet. Stronger, yes. But also marked. Before I returned to the room, I paused. Thank you, I said. He looked at me, really looked. For what? For seeing me, I replied. His expression softened, just slightly. You made it impossible not to. I closed the door behind me that time. Not in fear. In acceptance. As I lay down, exhaustion finally pulled me under. Not the kind that knocks you unconscious, but the kind that lets you rest knowing you survived something that could have erased you. And before sleep claimed me, one final thought surfaced. Survival isn't the end of the story. It's the part where the story finally belongs to you. Woke again before dawn. Not from fear this time. From awareness. The kind that sits quietly in your chest and reminds you that sleep is no longer an escape, but a pause. My body felt heavier, but steadier. The bruises still hurt, but they no longer defined every thought. Pain had shifted into something duller. Manageable. I lay still, listening. The building was never silent. It breathed. Pipes whispered. Floors settled. Somewhere far away, a door opened and closed. Life continuing, indifferent to what had nearly ended. I realized then that safety didn't feel like relief. It felt like space. Space to think without calculating exits. Space to breathe without flinching at every sound. Space to remember who I was before survival became my only skill. I sat up slowly and pressed my feet to the floor again. The same grounding ritual. The same reminder. I was here. I hadn't disappeared. When I stepped out into the corridor, the lights were dim. Morning was close, but not yet present. The world always felt most honest in that in-between hour. He was already awake. Of course he was. He stood near the window again, hands clasped behind his back, watching the city like it owed him answers. When he sensed me, he didn't turn immediately. He spoke instead. "You're adjusting," he said. "Yes," I replied. "And that scares me more than I expected." He turned then, studying my face. "Because it means you're not running anymore." I nodded. Running was simple. Living never is, he said. We stood there together without touching, without ceremony. Two people changed by the same night in very different ways. "They'll talk about this," I said quietly. "About you. About me." "They already are," he answered. "And you're fine with that?" He considered it. "I'm fine with the truth being heavier than the rumors." I thought about that. About how lies had protected my abusers for so long. About how silence had nearly destroyed me. "I don't want to disappear," I said suddenly. He didn't react, but I felt the moment land. "I don't want to be hidden," I continued. "I don't want to be erased for someone else's convenience." "You won't be," he said. Not a promise. A statement. The light outside shifted slightly, just enough to signal morning was inevitable now. I wrapped my arms around myself again, not in defense, but habit. "I don't know who I am without fear," I admitted. "You'll learn," he replied. Carefully. Slowly. That felt right. As the city woke, I felt something unfamiliar settle over me. Not hope. Not confidence. Ownership. Of my story. Of my survival. Of what came next. Whatever waited beyond this night, it would not find me trembling at a door again. I had crossed that threshold. And this time, I would walk forward awake. If you're still here with me, thank you. Not everyone stays to the end of a story like this. It takes patience. It takes empathy. It takes a certain kind of heart to sit with silence, with consequences, with quiet strength instead of noise. This is what Ari Love Beyond is about. Stories that don't rush you. Stories that let you breathe. Stories that sit in the dark with you, not to scare you, but to remind you that you're not alone in it. Some of you listen late at night. Some of you listen while the world sleeps. Some of you listen because the quiet is the only place you can hear yourself think. Wherever you are right now, I'm glad you're here. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something, even quietly, take a moment and tap like. Not for the algorithm. For the energy we share here. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. This space is built slowly, carefully, one story at a time. I'd also love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments what part stayed with you the longest. Or simply tell me where you're listening from tonight. Every comment reminds me how far these stories travel. More stories are coming. More quiet tension. More dangerous love. More moments where power meets vulnerability. Until then, take care of yourself. Stay soft. Stay aware. And I'll see you again. Right here. Beyond the noise.